Hello everyone, this is MC Deck Discussion and I am Abby Small. And today we have another deck discussion. And before I start, I did want to mention that this is going to be the first of two videos. I'm going to do a second video because I'm going to do a two deck comparison. I got into a discussion on Discord with Daring Lime and he had some suggestions about the deck and I made a few changes to it. So this deck is a ton of fun, but he got some ideas looking at this deck for his own deck that's different than it. And so went ahead and created a deck that I'm going to play test and then be able to do a video that compares the two so that people can, see both decks and be able to see what might inspire their own builds or a deck that they might want to try. So that'll come later. Let's get on to this deck here. Oh, please like and subscribe if you enjoy this kind of content. Also, please comment. I love having conversations with people there. So let's look at this deck. It's called Mistletoe to Toe, and that's on purpose that it has kind of this holiday-ish name to it because we have two main cards. Well, actually, really one card that it's built around, which is Toe to Toe. But then we also have included the Bellerophon, which ends up being an awesome card in this deck. And it has missile counters. So between the two of those, we have missile and Toe to Toe. So that's where the name comes from. Okay. So as long as we started talking about that, let's go ahead and go right there immediately. So Toe to Toe is a one-cost aggression card, right? It's an attack card, and it has this hero action. Choose an enemy. That enemy attacks you, deal 5 damage to that enemy. I've been wanting to build a deck for a long time based on this card, and it occurred to me recently to go ahead and try that with Bishop, because Bishop, in a lot of ways, likes being attacked, and it can trigger things that he wants to use. So with that in mind, that means that it can, let's look at some of those things that it can trigger, I should say. So first of all, that can deal 5 damage, right? But also, if the villain attacks you, that can trigger Bishop's own ability, right? So he has his energy absorption ability on his hero side. Let's go ahead and mention this real quickly, right? He has 2 attack, 2 thwart, 1 defense, 12 hit points, hand size of 5 on this side, hand size of 6 on his alter ego side. And he has the temporal and X-Men traits. And now let's get into the ability energy absorption, which is a response. After Bishop takes any amount of damage from an attack, discard an equal number of cards from the top of your deck. Add each resource discarded this way to your hand. So here, using Toe to Toe, you can not only deal 5 damage to the enemy, but then when they attack you, you get to possibly get more resource cards in your hand. And we have 10 of those, so I'll get to those in a little bit. But in addition, there are other things that can be triggered. So if you happen to have Bishop's uniform in play, which is really one of the key cards that you want to get into play, it's a 2-cost upgrade. It has item and temporal traits, has this response after resolve Bishop's energy absorption ability, exhaust Bishop's uniform, heal 1 damage from Bishop for each resource card in your hand. So you can really set that up nicely with Toe to Toe. In addition, it has 2 copies of You'll Pay for That. So this is a 1-cost event, a thwart event, has this hero response. After the villain attacks you, remove 1 threat from a scheme for each damage you took from the attack, to a maximum of 5, which is still really great for 1 cost, being able to remove typically anywhere. I found I typically remove anywhere from 2 at the minimum to 5 threat, and more likely 3 to 5 threat. So very powerful for just 1 cost. And Toe to Toe also was only 1 cost, so very efficient use. Plus, Toe to Toe puts resource cards in your hand, so that gives you even more cards to be able to play. Typically, I would actually You'll Pay for That with the X-Jet. So the X-Jet's included in here, right? So resource generator. And so I'll pay for that with this, but then save the resource cards here, which are all double resource cards for other cards in the deck. All right. And then, in addition to that, because we have more resource cards in here, that also can help to power up Bishop's rifle, right? So that's temporal and weapon upgrade. So cost of 2, it's restricted, has a hero action as an attack, exhaust Bishop's Rifle and choose an enemy, deal 1 damage to that enemy for each resource card in your hand. This attack gains range. So I found that because I was forcing enemies to attack me more frequently with toe-to-toe, that I ended up being able to power up Bishop's Rifle to make bigger attacks as well. In addition, that gave more resource cards, which a lot of times I'll actually include just 8 resource cards in my decks, but I included 10 in this, and that was working really well. And so they can also power up supercharged, right? So this is a card that you have this action, discard a resource card from your hand, place 1 charge counter here for each resource icon on that card. But then it has this hero interrupt. When you make a basic attack, you can discard supercharged, and you get +2 ATK on this attack for each charge counter here, up to a maximum of +8. So the goal is usually to max this out. So you end up with 4 charge counters on here to give it +8 attack, and he already has 2 attack, so he can attack for up to 10 attack if he has 1 of those in play. And sometimes you'll end up having 2 of these in play, in which case you can ramp that up all the way to +16 attack. Or perhaps you do a second attack and use the other +8 on that one. It wouldn't really matter which one you use, except that combining with toe-to-toe, it might be timing-wise that you use 1 supercharged on 1 attack. You end up readying Bishop because you have Utopia in this deck as well. So if you play an X-Men character afterwards, you can ready Bishop so that he could then be able to attack again with another supercharged powered up. Or, and in addition, we were able to play that ally because we had more resource cards in our hand because of being attacked by an enemy. So all of these synergies are very cool. Okay? So as long as we're talking about these resource cards, let's go ahead and go there. So I mentioned there are 10 of them. And so we have the 3 stored energy, which come in Bishop's deck, the usual doubles, energy, genius, and strength. And then the extras that are really considered that are be added in here are the power in all of us and the power of aggression. I'm going to talk about the power of aggression first. So I have 2 copies of these, which a lot of times that's not a card I would include, considering I only have 1, 2, 3, 4 targets for it. But 3 of those targets are pretty expensive. So the Bellerophon costs 6, Psylocke and Wolverine, these allies, both cost 4. So the power of aggression can really help with them, but normally that wouldn't be enough for me to include it. But because of Bishop's ability and because of being able to use toe-to-toe, which then also might, by the way, I forgot to mention, might trigger energy conversion if you have energy conversion in hand, right? So it has this hero interrupt, 0 cost defense. When an enemy attacks, shuffle each resource card in your discard pile into your deck. You cannot take more than 3 damage from this attack, so you can limit the amount of damage, but also you could gain up to maybe 3 cards, which are possibly resource cards that you can also add to your deck. So that's another way that you can get these into your hand. And so because of all of these different ways of getting resource cards into your hand, I found that time and time again, the Bellerophon, Psylocke, Sunfire, Wolverine, I almost always had one of these power of aggressions in my hand to play one of those cards. So I was really impressed with how all of that worked together in this deck. So let's go to the power in all of us. So 2 copies of this. This one's more obvious. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, 7 targets for this card. But really, we have a lot more than that because Lockjaw is basically always available once he's in the discard pile. So having the power in all of us to be able to double the number of resources this generates when paying for a basic card really helps to get Lockjaw back into play more frequently as well. And so that's a good reason to be including a couple of copies of this. Now, there is one reason why, and Daring Lion brought this up as a possibility, is one reason why we might want to exchange the power of aggression. I happen to really like the power of aggression in here, But there is one reason why a person might want to include instead those cards those resource cards that automatically come into your hand when you discard them, digging deep, right? So the reason why somebody might want to include digging deep instead is because when we're in alter ego, we have this card that we can use. So Weapon X is a 1-cost support, and you can only play it if you have the mutant trait. So you would play this when you're in your alter ego side, because the alter ego side is where where Bishop has his mutant trait. By the way, we should go over that real quickly. He has mutant and temporal and recovery of 4. 12 hit points, hand size of 6, we already mentioned that. And he has this ability, temporally displaced, which is we're going to talk about soon anyway. And that's this response. After you change to this form, add a temporal card to your add a temporal card in your discard pile to your hand. So we'll go over that in a little bit. But let me finish up with Weapon X. So for Weapon X, it has this alter ego action. Exhaust Weapon X and take 1 damage. Discard cards from your deck until you discard an identity-specific card, then add that card to your hand. So one of the issues that you often have with Bishop is when he discards cards using his energy absorption ability, he discards cards that you often would like to have in your hand, but don't because they're in your discard pile. Well, with Weapon X, when you get over to this side here, you're able to set yourself up, usually not at the end of a turn, though sometimes if you have enough resources to play cards. But a lot of times you'll do this at the beginning of your turn, your next turn in alter ego, so that you can put one of your identity-specific cards in your hand and hopefully not skip something important like energy conversion. Okay. All right, so let's go into other things with regard to alter ego. So that is one of the key elements of play in this, is going to alter ego. So that is why we have Psylocke in this deck, who has the ability to has 2 psionic counters when she enters, right? So she's a 4-cost ally, 1 attack, 2 thwart, health of 3, has the psionic and X-Men traits. So she enters play with 2 psionic counters on her and has this interrupt. When Psylocke attacks an enemy, remove 1 psionic counter from her. Then you can confuse that enemy and deal 1 damage to it. And so when you use this ability, that means since you have 2 psionic counters, you have the ability to confuse the villain twice. And I don't always save that in a lot of decks, but in this deck I do. I usually save both of her confuses for specifically when I'm attacking the villain, and make sure to confuse the villain twice so I can go down to alter ego as frequently as I wish to, in order to be able to trigger Bishop's temporally displaced ability on his alter ego side, right? That puts a temporal card in your discard pile. In addition to that, we have Professor X, who can also confuse the villain. So we have those 3 confuses available in order to go to this side to trigger this ability, to also be able to use Weapon X. And in addition to that, this gives you the ability, if you discarded Bishop's rifle or Bishop's uniform, when you're using Bishop's hero ability, energy absorption, and that happens a lot because you're using toe to toe, you're getting attacked by the villain generally, so it's happening more than it often does. But that gives you an opportunity to get Bishop's uniform, easily one of the most important cards to have in play, that gets discarded. Same with Bishop's rifle. So you go to alter ego side, both of those cards are temporal cards. So Bishop's rifle is a temporal card. Bishop's uniform is a temporal card. So when you use the alter ego ability here, right? So you, again, response, after you change to this form, add a temporal card in your discard pile to your hand. That gives you the ability to get the uniform or the rifle in the hand, and you can do it relatively quickly, which is why, by the way, so I have some deck refinements as I was doing some villain playtesting, and based on my conversation with Daring Lime, I ended up removing, so I very often choose to put 2 player side schemes in a lot of my decks, and that's build support and also superpower training. So in this case, superpower training became really unnecessary. So that's the one where if you defeat it, you can search your deck and discard pile for an identity-specific upgrade and put it into play. So that was purposefully in this deck in order to get the uniform and or the rifle into play, but it became completely unnecessary because of how efficiently this deck worked to get Bishop's uniform and rifle either in hand or discarded, and then go to Alter Ego and be able to get them into play. So that ended up being unnecessary. So I actually removed those cards, which tend to be pretty standard in a lot of my decks, and I ended up adding Face the Past. Instead, right? So, I forgot to finish talking about Digging Deep. So Digging Deep was where I talked about a possible exchange one might decide to make instead of Power of Aggression, though personally I really liked Power of Aggression a lot. But when you are using Weapon X, when you discard cards in your Alter Ego form, those cards are not, any resource cards are not going to go into your hand. And Digging Deep, copies of Digging Deep, after this card is discarded from the top of your deck, add it to your hand, those cards would go into your hand. Okay. Speaking of which, by the way, with all the discarding we're doing, we also have White Fox in this deck. So you have the ability to get White Fox into play, right? So as a reminder, or just in case some people don't know, it's a 3-cost ally, 1 attack, 1 thwart, 3 health. But here's the important part. Has this response after White Fox is discarded from the top of your deck, put her into play under your control. So it's nice to get her into play just basically for free. Okay. All right, so I was about to talk about adding Face the Past. So originally I didn't have Face the Past in the deck, and this one I decided to put in the deck because what I was finding was that, so he has his Nemesis minion, it has Quick Strike and attacks for 3, which is nice because that can add to, what you're attacking with, but it also brings in a side scheme that has 4 threat on it. So bringing in both of those at the same time isn't as nice as actually being able to bring in that Nemesis minion on your own using Face the Past, trigger, your ability because of the Quick Strike still occurs. So you can still trigger Bishop's ability when that minion attacks you, but you are controlling when you get attacked. And this way you also get 3 additional cards, right? So Face the Past is a 0-cost event. You search the encounter deck, discard pile, set aside area for your Nemesis minion, you reveal it. Then you can ready your hero and draw 3 cards. You can't attack the villain that phase, and then you remove this card from the game. But typically this is meant to be like a setup card, and you can usually pretty easily get rid of that Nemesis minion in this case, right? It has 5 health, and that's usually not a problem in this deck to get rid of him, including possibly with Toe to Toe. All right, so let's finish up with a couple more things. First of all, there's the Bellerophon. So this is a relatively new card in the game, right? A 6-cost aggression card, and which is actually pretty nice in this deck because with all the resources, especially double resources that Bishop has, including the Power of Aggression, that ends up making the Bellerophon relatively easy to get into play. And when you play the Bellerophon, it's meant to be strategically used. So you want to hold on to it and use it when necessary, typically, or when very useful, typically when you have some minions in play, not just to attack the villain. So let's look at how this works. It includes just 3 missiles, has this action: exhaust the Bellerophon, remove 1 missile counter from it, and choose a player. Deal 3 damage to the villain and each minion engaged with that player, discarding all tough status cards from the enemies first. Note that this is not an attack. So if any minions have guard, this does not prevent the 3 damage that goes to the villain as well. So it helps to contribute to villain damage, and also, of course, helps to get rid of these pesky minions and all of their tough statuses. So it's been a really effective card, and I usually will use it to help do final damage to the villain, which is what I'm probably going to talk about next. Let me make sure I covered everything else. Yes, so we're ready for that. So the burst damage. So this card, this is actually a high tempo deck, which isn't what I usually build. I build control decks that are meant to build up and assure that you're going to win. So my decks have a tendency to be real consistent, winning decks against, at least against the villains that I play against. Oh, speaking of which, the villains this was tested against, as usual, I do standard and expert, and it was tested against Claw. Oh, and I have an expert house rule for Claw now. I'll go over that real quickly in a little bit. But then also Unis, Dark Beast, and Magneto. So really, really great ones to test the deck against. I've been enjoying these four, by the way, for a little while now. And so that final burst damage I've been getting, so when you combine the possibility of having toe-to-toe in play, these supercharged cards in play, maybe one or two. I always had at least one of them in play for that final burst damage, but a lot of times, but I should say once in a while I'd have two of them. The Bellerophon would contribute damage. You have allies contributing damage. Bishop, of course, himself contributing damage. So between all of those, oh, and he has his own attack card, which I never brought up, but his Concussive Blast is a 3-cost event. Attack and superpower, deal 6 damage to an enemy. If you paid for this event with a resource card, Ready Bishop, so that's also really nice. So between all of those, in the 8 victories against these villains, 6 of them did at least 30 points of damage, up to 36 points. 2 of the games did 36 points of damage. So very nice explosive damage at the end, but also dealing damage all along the way because of toe-to-toe, adding to Concussive Blast. You have plenty of plenty of allies to help take care of thwarting, but also take care of attacking the villain and minions, especially because you'll pay for that often will end up taking care of some of the scheming. So you can end up focusing on your allies actually attacking minions and villains very often. So this is a high tempo deck rather than but at the same time, it has a lot of control, but it's really it acts more like it's a control deck that acts more like a high tempo deck. All right. So that should be it. Have a good one, everybody. I highly recommend trying this deck out or using it as inspiration for your own build. And I will see you next time. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy this content. I'll see you later, or talk to you later anyway.